all of us want things to go much higher right now is generally the sentiment as us in the industry. I think it's important to take a step back and recognize that there are many different factors that go in determining the price on any given day. In any commodity market, the silver market is no exception. In fact, silver is an even better electrical conductor than copper. It's the best on the entire periodic table. And in this backdrop, silver is finding new and novel sources of demand. And I'd say that the one that's been most robust and that continues to surprise us every year when the numbers come out is silver's use in photovoltaic cells, the solar industry. Again, you need to pay that premium to get the best electrical conductor, silver, to make that panel as efficient as possible and be able to compete with fossil fuels in terms of their energy efficiency. In fact, silver is an even better electrical conductor than copper. It's the best on the entire periodic table. And in this backdrop, silver is finding new and novel sources of demand. And I'd say that the one that's been most robust and that continues to surprise us every year when the numbers come out is silver's use in photovoltaic cells, the solar industry. Again, you need to pay that premium to get the best electrical conductor, silver, to make that panel as efficient as possible and be able to compete with fossil fuels in terms of their energy efficiency.
The world needs more silver, as the mining industry is only producing around 800 million ounces a year, and the demand on the other side is close to 1.2 billion ounces of silver a year. And the price for an ounce of silver just got above $30 today again, and now it's really the time to start researching for the next big thing, especially in the interesting silver market. And today with me is Andrew Williams. He's the CEO of New Pacific Metals, a silver developer with projects in Bolivia. First of all, thank you for your time, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Great. So before we start talking about your great projects, your pre-feasibility study, and some great shareholders on your share registry, let's talk about the, let's say, silver industry in general, right? Because everybody is expecting silver to basically explode soon, right? I've talked to Rick Rule, to all these big guys, and everyone is basically waiting because the setup is quite nice, as we have seen it with uranium in the last year. Now we got above $30 level again. So what do you think has to happen to see the silver industry rise again? Or do you think we have to wait until the prices are exploding? What are your thoughts on the industry in general?
Yeah, great question, Jan. And I think I think all of us want things to go much higher right now is generally the sentiment as us in the industry. And I think it's important to take a step back and recognize that there are many different factors that go in determining the price on any given day. In any commodity market, the silver market is no exception. And so I think with that being said, we don't know exactly when prices will explode. But I think the point that you mentioned, that there's a highly combustible situation within the silver industry today, I think that's accurate. And just when the match eventually gets lit and thrown into the fire, that's really anyone's guess. And as you wait, it's important to find good, high quality stories such as ours to camp out in while you wait for that to happen. And I think if you look at the drivers for silver, I think what differentiates it from gold, if you look at gold, it's about 90% of gold demand is investment driven and only about 10% is on the industrial side. But for silver, it's more balanced. It's about 50-50. And so when you look at the industrial side of the equation, I think the really interesting story that's developing in silver is as the world is pushing itself towards more and more electrification, typically copper grabs a lot of the headlines, copper being the electricity metal. But in fact, silver is an even better electrical conductor than copper. It's the best on the entire periodic table. And in this backdrop, silver is finding new and novel sources of demand. And I'd say that the one that's been most robust and that continues to surprise us every year when the numbers come out is silver's use in photovoltaic cells, the solar industry. Again, you need to pay that premium to get the best electrical conductor, silver, to make that panel as efficient as possible and be able to compete with fossil fuels in terms of their energy efficiency. And so that's been a huge demand driver on the silver side. And my other point that I like to flag is that there will be new and novel demand introductions for silver on the industrial side that we don't even know about yet. Again, as the world is pouring countless billions and billions of dollars into research and development, I'm confident that there are going to be new industrial uses for silver. But if you look across the board, solar voltaics, the automotive industry, again, if you look at a car 20 years ago, you were state of the art if you had a backup camera, and now these things are just packed with more and more electronics. I think there's now 1.5, 2 ounces of silver in every vehicle produced, and that's doubled from where it was 20 years ago. And so that's the auto industry. And you sort of go across the board, and we're trying to pack more and more electrons into things and electrify our world. Silver will find new and novel demands. And so that's really a strong backdrop on the industrial side. And then on the hard asset side, which again follows all the similarities to gold, that's also a fantastic story. I think, I'm here in Canada. You look at the United States, countries around the world have found it a very easy way to solve problems, to print money and to run very large deficits. And that's a situation that there's a very long archive of history that suggests that that printing money is the most expedient way to deal with unsustainable debts. And in those environments, precious metals such as gold and silver have really shown, and we expect to see that once again at some point in the future. And I'll just flag with silver, because of those unique demand dynamics, that there's a much greater part that is on the industrial side. Silver tends to have less supply being allocated to the investment side, and hence there's a greater, or I should say, it's a more supply inelastic response to higher prices. And so typically, if you look at the silver price relative to gold, it's about 1.5 times as volatile. And so if you've got a view on the financial side for hard assets, and if you want, we sort of call it gold on steroids, silver fits really well for a way to express that view as an investment. And so if you look at it on both the industrial side and the investment side, there's a very strong case for silver today. And then there's just one other point that I like to flag that isn't as well advertised, but it's one that I'd encourage people to think about, is especially, and this is probably pertains more so to the industrial argument, but most of silver's production, about 3/4 of it, is produced as a byproduct of other base metal mines. It's very rare to have a pure silver deposit. And so why that's important is that when you get into a situation with a very strong demand coming in, typically what you see in commodity markets is you find new sources of supply to satiate that demand, and over the long run, it brings prices down. We saw that if you look at the 2000 commodity super cycle with China coming online as a major consumer, we saw, let's say, the price of oil creep up, and then that was partially satiated by, in Canada, we developed our oil sands. In the U.S., they developed fracking. Lots of copper deposits came online in that time horizon. But if you look at, for example, a metal like molybdenum, let's say, or if you look at all the commodities that performed in the last cycle, molybdenum was probably one of the best performing commodities in the entire suite. And most molybdenum, like silver, is produced as a byproduct. And so what happens is that when you get that wave of demand, there just isn't that supply response that comes online. Like if you look at silver, one of the largest silver producing mines in the world is Antamina, let's say, which produces like 15 million ounces of silver a year. It's a huge amount of silver, but its main driver is copper. And so what happens if there's a significant silver demand shortage, as the conditions are shaping up to be, Antamina is not going to ramp up their silver production to meet that that increased demand, because it's just not what drives the economics. And that's where you get these very interesting, these wild price movements that we've seen in previous cycles in metals like molybdenum, metals like silver, where there's that unique element within the market that most of it is produced as a byproduct. So when you look at that sort of that market dynamic, the industrial side, the investment side, it's a very strong environment today for silver. And when it's going to break, it's anyone's guess. That's why I would encourage investors to find a high quality place to camp out at while we're waiting for this environment to really run.
Great, Andrew. Thank you very much. And I think everybody can really see your background from an analyst point of view, because you really understand the market. And as you already said, silver is in a quite unique situation, right? We do have it as a precious metal, and we do have it on the industrial side. And also, New Pacific is in a quite unique situation, because most of the, let's say, smaller or junior companies, if you like, they have like maybe one of the larger shareholders, or maybe one of the larger companies with them. But in your case, you also have a unique situation, because you've got Pan American Silver and also Silvercorp Metals with you. So maybe you can just start by giving us a brief overview about the company. Why are those two, let's say, majors interested in you?
Yeah, so it certainly is a differentiator for us. I think just most recently, as any development junior, one of the hardest things is to raise capital. And in a really tough environment last September, we were able to pull in Canadian $35 million into our treasury, no warrants, clean financing, and really a strong show of support from our two major shareholders. And I think if you go back in history, it was originally the exploration concept, the Silver Sand project in 2017, that attracted both Silver Sand and Pan American Silver. Pan American Silver, they've been operating in Bolivia for since the early 2000s. They know the country very, very well, and saw the geological prospectivity. So both companies, Silvercorp as well, they were in our company pre-discovery 2017, and so they've been very active shareholders up until the present, and continue to be interested. They both understand the scarcity of high quality undeveloped silver deposits. I mean, you look at a company like Pan American Silver, they are a silver company, but it's so hard to find large scale silver assets with good economics. And hence you've seen their recent acquisitions, Tahoe Resources, Yamana, and that just seems to be a fate that a lot of silver companies go down. First Majestic Silver, for example, getting into gold in Nevada, and time again, underscoring just how rare it is to find new high quality silver deposits, and hence the attraction to what we've got in Bolivia with our Silver Sand project, and we're slowly unearthing our next one, the Carangas project. And so I think that's really it's a quality of the deposit and an understanding of the jurisdiction that's attracted them to us, and have kept them there as supportive shareholders.
That's good. And maybe it's also the management, or you as the CEO, because we always tell the investors that really you need to have a great company, but it's not always about the grade, not always about the jurisdiction. And sometimes it's really just come down to the management and to the CEO, because these are really the people that are making the decisions. They are negotiating, and they are responsible for my money and my investment, and also obviously for Pan American Silver's investment, for example. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about your background, your company's management background, and especially the question that shareholders always have is, do they have skin in the game? Are they invested themselves? Do they want to grow the company for themselves and us as investors together? So tell us a little bit more about you and the strategy.
Sure. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that is, there's no question about it. I'm glad you're encouraging your listeners to dig deeper into the people, because I think that's the part that often is underanalyzed in a lot of these situations. So, I mean, myself, I started out, my background is in accounting. I did my chartered accountancy at Deloitte here in Vancouver. I didn't really know much about the mining industry at the time, but it turns out that a lot of our client base was in the mining industry, all the big guys. I mean, Goldcorp was a very big client of ours, Yamana, and so on and so forth. So kind of cut my teeth in the industry on the financial side. And then I switched into more of the business evaluation side of things within Deloitte, which then launched me into my next career move, which was at a precious metals focused investment fund. I joined as a research analyst, not really knowing what I was getting myself into, but what turned out to be maybe a temporary thing. It was almost 11 years. I progressed up through the ranks, was a portfolio manager during the latter part of my tenure there. And in that, I was able to travel the world. I've been on nearly 100 different mine site visits. I've met the entire industry's management team. It's one of the great privileges that you get being on the buy side is getting exposure not only to the assets but also the people, the analysts, and so developed a very good understanding of the industry, and really also came to appreciate just how rare new discoveries are. I think being an analyst from where I started on the investment side in 2012, it was not all that often where you'd see a new discovery. And if you rewind the clock, I always imagine if I were an analyst in the 1990s, let's say, where new discoveries were being made, 4 or 5 of them every new year as exploration companies were scouring the globe, the end of the Cold War, and new frontiers in Africa and South America and the like were open for business. And during my tenure, there's a notable drop off in new discoveries, and so over time, I came to appreciate just how rare it was for a company to make a high quality discovery that could be turned into a mine one day, and that's really what attracted me to New Pacific Metals. And the other thing that I've observed is that to be a successful exploration company, let's say for every 1,000 of them, there's one that make a real discovery. There's a natural evolution and a transition from being a successful exploration company into a project development company. And so it was in that transition from exploration to development that I knew, again, knowing the industry and the people New Pacific Metals was going through. And so I was chatting with the founder at the time and the CEO about using some extra horsepower, someone with my skill set to help move this thing through the development phase as the company was evolving. And there was a natural fit. And so in January of last year, 2023, I joined as the company's president. And at that time I joined, you talk about skin in the game, I made a $250,000 personal investment into the company. So it was my skin in the game, which for a young guy like myself was a meaningful figure. And then in September of last year, I was promoted into the CEO position that I'm still in today talking to you.
Great. Thank you very much for giving us a little bit of insights on your background and also on your personal investment here. And I think which is good, a thing which is good is that you came from an analyst point of view. So maybe we can switch seats for a second, right? So instead of talking from a CEO perspective, tell us more from an analyst perspective about the company. Because you want to start with 16 million ounces of silver production a year. And that equals almost the 2023 production of Hecla Mining, which is considered to be one of the largest mining companies for silver in North America with a market cap of more than $3 billion. Even if we compare your all-in sustaining cost, right, your AISC at $10.4 with Hecla's at 11.3, that's impressive, even if we consider that Hecla is more on the lower side of the cost curve. So tell us more about your exciting silver sand project, your pre-feasibility study, and the projects you also have.
Yeah, so that's really the financial part of it really speaks to me as you have pointed out. So our silver sand project, we published our pre-feasibility study just last week, and highlighting at $24 an ounce silver, $740 million after tax net present value, and at $30 silver, where we find ourselves today, the after-tax net present value is over $1.1 billion of net present value, which is multiples in excess of our current market capitalization today. But that's just NPV is one thing. There's plenty of companies out there that can advertise a significant NPV, and we're definitely in that privileged camp. But I think what really differentiates us and what caught my attention, what I like, is the efficiency of that NPV. So from a financeability, can you build it? Can you finance it? And on the financing side, we're blessed at the Silver Sand project to have a high-grade starter pit. So in each of those first 3 years, we'll be producing that Hecla scale silver production, as you pointed out, which drives at $24 an ounce silver, a sub 2-year payback period after tax on the capital. And that really makes my life a heck of a lot easier if we go down the road of financing and building these things as a company. It's just infinitely more attractive to different providers when we can get the financing, build the mine, and pay back that capital as soon as possible. That's really critical in this industry, is to be able to make positive cash flow and get that balance sheet delevered as soon as you can, because it's a risky industry. It's risky enough. We don't need to have endless amounts of debt on the balance sheet. And that's something that really I like about this project, is that financeability. And if you also look at another metric that we cite, is the net present value relative to the capex. So again, we've got at $24 silver, $740 million of net present value on a upfront capital investment of $358 million. That's an over 2-to-1 net present value to capex, and we've screened that against other projects, undeveloped projects in the industry, and it really comes out as one of the best. And so, from a capital efficiency perspective, the Silver Sand is a really strong project, one of the best, if not the best, undeveloped precious metals projects in the world. And that's just Silver Sand. We haven't even got into our Carangas project that we're looking forward to releasing preliminary economics on in September of this year.
This sounds really great. And I think you already said that, which is always good for investors also to understand, that you can start with really the high grade if you start producing. Because we've had companies in the past, and you probably know them as well, they started with the low grade and then they couldn't really get to the high grade fast enough. So they burned money within the first few months and years. And then something happened, right? The pipelines were frozen because the weather was too cold, for example. And then all of a sudden the debt was too high and the company couldn't really pay the bills. So therefore, it's really important, if you start producing, to really start with the high grade to get the money in and to really bring the company on into a good path. And I think you're on a good path when it comes to the finance side. But you also talked about the Carangas project already. You have also the Silver Strike project. Both of them are in Bolivia. And let's talk about Bolivia. Why Bolivia? Why are you in this jurisdiction? And maybe we can talk about the ups and also the risks in this country.
Yeah. So, Bolivia is a country that's maybe not as a lot of folks aren't as familiar with. And it's funny, you go back in time, Bolivia's got a 500-year mining history. And over the last cycle, there were 3 great mines that were built in Bolivia. Probably the biggest and most successful was the San Cristobal operation that was run by Sumitomo Metals for a number of years. I mentioned Pan American Silver. It has had a very successful mine running there for over 20 years, San Vicente. And Core Mining, they built and operated for a number of years their San Bartolome operation. And all 3 of those operations continue to run today. Now, they've been going now for sort of 15, 20 plus years. And I don't care what any mining promoter tells you, these mines don't last forever. And so what we are promoting ourselves in the country is that these projects have underpinned they've really underpinned a large segment of the economy, in particular in Potosi, where our Silver Sand project is, with the taxes and royalties for a number of years. And that needs to be replenished. This is a very capital intensive industry, and we need to bring new mining development online. And so that's what we spend a lot of our time with the government, telling our story and getting the support that we need, and we very much think that it's just a matter of time before the government really starts to push and get behind us with the new project development, because the country needs it. I mean, I think if you were to just Google and look up what's the latest news in Bolivia, the economy is really a big talking point. They had at one point $15 billion of foreign exchange reserves, and they're basically down to fumes. And the government is looking for new ways to reinvigorate the economy. And much like the country has done in its history, they've turned to the mining sector. And now that being said, the country is not without its risks. I'm not going to pretend like operating in Bolivia is better than operating in, let's say, like Nevada or Quebec or something, which are the real blue chip jurisdictions. But what I do like to flag to folks is, look, at the end of the day, political risk is risk. And what is risk in the mining industry? It's the permanent loss of your capital. And what I've observed through my time as an analyst and portfolio manager is that what often happens when you have a myopic view of political jurisdiction is that you end up getting backed into certain corners in safe jurisdictions with an extraordinary amount of and an unnecessarily high degree of technical risk. Usually it's either the geology or it's the mining engineering side. And I've seen just recently over the last 5 years, many different case studies where investors have been completely wiped out in jurisdictions, whether it's Ontario or Quebec or Nevada or Western Australia. And they're all situations where investors have taken on a huge amount of technical risk in exchange for that political security. And so I think if you run that all the way through, I've also seen many instances where investors have done really well going to less traditional jurisdictions. And one of the inspiration stories that really got me to think outside the box jurisdictionally was Lundin Gold as a recent example, going into Ecuador when it had a very bad reputation and having a very successful mine build. And that's been a great win for not only Lundin Gold shareholders, but also the country of Ecuador and the communities in which they operate. And so, but what's made them successful, if you're going to go into a country like Bolivia or Ecuador, or wherever it is you need to have high quality deposits where the technical risk has been reduced down to a level that I sort of call it like the silver sand project would have been mined in the 90s at lower silver prices. It's just the quality of the deposit is so good. So that's really what you have to do when you go to a jurisdiction like Bolivia, is make sure you focus on high quality projects with low technical risk, and that's what we've got at our silver sand and Carangas projects. And so I think no jurisdiction is perfect, but we really like where we're sitting in Bolivia. Again, it's a mining country, and that's the other important point to flag. Is maybe there's some countries that have been in the headlines recently for being unfriendly to mineral development, but those aren't mining countries. Where unlike in Bolivia, where 47% of the country's exports are from mining. It's the 5th largest silver producer in the world. They produce over 40 million ounces of silver. You go to the local towns and the parades; they've got young kids that are marching down the boardwalk wearing their miners' hats on their belt. So I mean, it's got a very deep mining history, and so I think we're very happy to call it our home, and we think that there's going to be a new era of silver development in Bolivia that we're going to lead.
Great. Andrew, thank you very much for summarizing all of this and really telling us more about the company, the jurisdiction. We also talked about your production that you are aiming for. We talked about your low all-in sustaining cost, and all of this sounds really great. But in the end, let's talk about the real deal, if you like. I mean, you used to be a mining portfolio manager. Would New Pacific be in your portfolio? And if so, tell us why. What are the main reasons for you for institutionals or even retailers to invest into the stock?
Yeah, I think for me as an investor, I would always focus on business models. Exploration was just never a game that I like to play. I think it's very tough to make wins in exploration. The producers, again, on the side, it's very hard to eke out returns investing in producers. They're very well covered by 15 different analysts, and usually when it comes time for them to replace their depletion, they do it in a way that's value destructive. And so the sweet spot I've found is in project development companies. And again, unlike exploration where they get all the attention, it's like the quarterback of the football team. The project developers are more like the left tackle, the guy that plays a critical role in the team protecting the quarterback. And that's really where you can create a lot of value is through a successful project development cycle. I mentioned Lundin Gold. There's others like Orla Mining, and in Australia, there's companies like Capricorn Metals, and there's Emerald Mining in Australia. I mean, there's a lot of recent examples of companies that have created value through successful project development, and so that's what we have here. Why don't more companies do it? It's because it's so hard to find these new deposits, going back to how rare these new discoveries are. And so, again, we've got that critical ingredient. We've got the deposits to make it work. We've got the cash and the financial backers to finance us through that development without diluting our shareholders into oblivion. And what I've just the last point, I know I talked about myself, but we've got a great team in Bolivia. And that's one of the things that I like most about this job is that the people that are involved on the ground, they see this as a very meaningful opportunity to do good for their country. And so when you combine all these ingredients, we've got the right assets, we've got the right people, and we've got the right financial backers. That to me is a recipe for success for a strong business. And so that's I mean, if of course it's in my portfolio. It's my only portfolio position now, being in a corporate as opposed to owning a diversified mix of companies. But yeah, no, absolutely, it's a very great time to be involved in our company, and then you just layer on top of it the macroeconomic backdrop at silver that we talked about at the outset of this discussion. I think it's a very good situation to be in.
Great. Andrew, thank you very much for all your insights, and for our listeners, all the informations can be found in the link below. We will be linking the company corporate presentation, and everybody can do their due diligence on their own. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to all your milestones that you talked about that you want to achieve within the next few months and years. Thank you very much.
All right. Pleasure chatting with you, Jan.